All right, today we're going underground. We're talking about the world of underground residential distribution, or URD. And let me tell you, it's a completely different ball game down there. The rules change, the risks are hidden, and, knowing your safety manual, well, that's not just about passing a test. It's about staying alive.
Look, when you're working overhead, you kind of know what you're up against, right? You can see the lines, you can see a storm rolling in. The threats are, well, they're right there in front of you. But URD, man, that's a different beast. The dangers are invisible, hiding in these tight, confined spaces. What seems totally fine on the surface could be a life or death situation just a little ways down.
And hey, don't just take my word for it. The IEC safety manual itself lays it out pretty clearly. It says, with URD systems, you've got these confined spaces, you've got way less room between energized parts, and you're exposed to all sorts of grounds. So yeah, this is not your average day at the office. Every single move you make is absolutely critical.
So the big question is, how do you handle these hidden dangers? Well, it all kicks off before you even touch a tool. Before you even think about lifting a cover. Your number one most important line of defense, it's that pre-job safety brief.
And let's be super clear here. This is not a suggestion, it's not optional. The manual, section 1B4, says every single job briefing has to cover these 5 things. You've got to talk about the hazards, go over the work procedures, figure out any special precautions, double-check your energy controls, and make sure everyone's got the right PPE. This isn't just busy work, it's the game plan for keeping your whole crew safe.
This really gets to the heart of the whole safety manual. Sure, your supervisor has a job to do, management has their responsibilities, but at the end of the day, Section 1.c spells it out. Your safety is your personal responsibility. You're the one in the trench. You're the one on the line.
Okay, let's get into what is probably the single most critical thing you'll ever do in URD work. Proving a cable is actually dead. Someone can tell you a cable is de-energized, but you just can't take their word for it. You have to prove it for yourself. It's that old saying, right? Trust, but verify.
Listen up. If you forget everything else we talk about today, remember this. Burn this phrase into your brain. It's straight from the manual, section 7C, and it's the golden rule. If it isn't grounded, it isn't dead. That's it. An ungrounded cable is a live cable. End of story, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
So how do we make sure it's grounded and dead? The manual gives us a rock-solid 5-step process. You've got to do it in this exact order, every time. First, identify the right cable. Second, isolate it from all its power sources. Third, you test it for voltage. Fourth, you ground it. And fifth, you tag it. Identify, isolate, test, ground, tag. No skipping steps.
But we all know how it goes out in the field, right? Things aren't always perfect. So what happens if the tags aren't clear? Or what if you think your tester might be on the fritz? What do you do when there's even that tiny nagging feeling, that little voice in your head that makes you doubt if the cable you're about to work on is really de-energized?
When you're in that situation, the manual gives you one and only one answer, and it's completely unambiguous. Section 8.D2 says if you can't be 100% positive that a cable is dead, you spike it. That's the ultimate proof. You're creating a controlled fault to prove, without a shadow of a doubt, that it's safe.
Now, you don't just go and jam something into the cable, obviously. This is a very specific, controlled procedure. You've got to ground the spiking tool itself. You need to make sure any other cables nearby are protected. And of course, you're wearing your rubber gloves, your leathers, and using the right insulated tools. It's a deliberate process with its own set of safety rules.
Okay, so we all know there are times when you just can't de-energize the equipment. It's not an option. So what are the rules for when you absolutely have to work on or near live USRD gear?
All right, here's another one of those rules with absolutely no gray area. Section 8F. It's worded this way for a very good reason. It says your rubber gloves and sleeves, they have to be on from the second that enclosure is open until the very second it's closed and the job is done.
There's no wiggle room there. If that cabinet door is open, your PPE is on. Period. And look, your life literally depends on those gloves. So the manual says you have to inspect them every single day before you use them. First, give them a good visual check. Look for any little hole, tear, cut, even if the texture just feels weird. Then you do the air test. You know the drill. Trap some air in there, roll the cuff, and give it a good squeeze. You're listening, you're feeling for even the tiniest little leak. Your gloves are your last line of defense, so you gotta make sure they're flawless. When you're working in a tight space with live gear, the key is to isolate your work area. The rule is simple, one at a time. You only work on one energized cable at a time. And everything else? Everything. Other cables, grounded metal parts, anything you might accidentally touch, it has to be completely covered up with rubber blankets.
All right, now let's go even deeper. Literally. Let's talk about working inside manholes and vaults. Those confined spaces. Down there, the biggest danger isn't always a hot cable. Sometimes it's the air itself.
So, what exactly is a hazardous atmosphere? The manual is really specific about this. It's not just about, a gas leak. It's also about the oxygen. If there's too little oxygen, you can't breathe. But if there's too much oxygen, it makes everything super flammable. The sweet spot, the safe zone, is actually a pretty narrow window.
Yeah, take a look. That safe zone is pretty tight. If the oxygen level dips below 19.5% or goes above 23.5%, you are officially in a hazardous atmosphere. And these aren't just random numbers on a page. They're the line between going in safely and a really, really bad day.
And that's why there's a strict testing sequence you have to follow before anyone goes in. The order here is critical. First, you test for oxygen. And you have to do this first because if the oxygen is off, your flammable gas meter won't give you an accurate reading anyway. So, once you know the oxygen is good, then you test for flammable gases. If you fail either of those tests, you get that space ventilated, and then you start the whole testing process right from the top.
And this is a big one. You never, ever work in a confined space by yourself. The manual is crystal clear on this. There has to be a trained attendant right there at the entrance, ready to help or start a rescue at a moment's notice. And that's their only job, to watch the person inside and be prepared for an emergency.
So we've talked about procedures, we've talked about gear, we've talked about different environments, but now let's bring it all home to the single most important piece of safety equipment on any job, and that's you. I think this is one of the most powerful lines in the entire manual. It basically gives you the final say. It says that if you're not satisfied, if you don't feel that a job can be done safely, then you don't do it. You have the right and actually the responsibility to stop the job. Remember, your life is on the line. The final safety check is you. So, I'll leave you with this. Before you head out to your next URD job, just ask yourself, what's the one rule I'm going to review? Is it grounding? Is it my glove inspection? The job brief? Think about it. Because knowing this stuff inside and out isn't about being good at your job. It's about making sure you walk in the door at home safe at the end of the day.